Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. I thought Cersei was running mad when she said your name. Jaime was watching Wreck-It from the opposite side of the room, as if afraid to get too close. Half in shadow, his one visible eye narrowed, a green glimmer cutting through the fading light. Even I cannot deny what I see right in front of me. So, what are you? An avenging angel seeking retribution for a slain wife and children. I would have wagered. What would the point be? Asked Wreck-It. He moved around the painted table, inching closer to the other man. Jaime had just arrived from King's Landing, with a delegation appointed by the small council in tow. Under Cersei, it seemed the small council was smaller than ever. Even when his father was king, he thought wryly. He managed to keep a fully manned small council. Casting a wary eye over the miniature Westeros, he continued. Everyone involved in the sack is dead, or almost everyone. Brace yourself for more grievous news then, your grace, said Jaime, a lilt of amusement in his voice. Pycelle died a few weeks ago. You just missed him. Despite the gravity of the atmosphere between them, Rugier laughed. How will I ever heal my grieving heart? Sir Jaime? By marrying my sister, apparently, the other man replied, briskly returning them to the matter at hand. For what it's worth, she's always loved you. Almost as much as she's loved you, he nearly replied. He had to bite his tongue lest he say something he would later regret. Jon and the others would make him regret it even more. But even now, in the early days of negotiations, it felt like he was slowly being shackled. If I marry Cersei, she would only ever be my consort, said Rhaegar. I will, of course, accept co-ruler, but she cannot remain as sole monarch of the Seven Kingdoms. She is reliant on my Targaryen name and my Valyrian blood to prop up this realm. After all, Jaime emerged from the shadowy corner he'd taken up in, revealing himself to the light of day. He looked older than his years. There was none of the youthful swagger left in him now. He came to stand by Rhaegar's side as they both looked out of the bay windows, taking in the view of the rolling seas and distant cliffs. On a clear day, they could see all the way to Cracklaw Point. Alas, today was not a clear day. Beyond a mile or two, it was all salt and sea mists, mixing with the acrid smoke of Dragonmont. If I had my way, she would not be queen at all. Jaime spoke so softly that Rhaegar almost missed it. It will take a lot more than an old name to save us now. As Rhaegar turned towards him, frowning. As Jaime repeated, she and I can see you don't understand. But she's my twin sister. No matter if we lose everything else, we still have each other. His words sounded as hollow as the look in his eye. There was a man watching his world slowly falling away. But Rhaegar knew that feeling. He had been there himself, not so long ago. Every battle lost was another chunk of defeat served cold and bitter. Only, Jon had turned the tables and it was the Targaryen and Stark alliance devouring the realm. Emphasizing the point, Rhaegar turned back to the painted table. The same painted table that Aegon the Conqueror once planned his own invasion. It was old and faded now. Bits had been chipped away and hastily repaired, painted over and touched up. Other parts had been added, allowing for new castles and boundaries redrawn. Despite its age, it showed a blunt truth. It showed King's Landing surrounded by enemy forces. Only the Westerlands stood with the Lannisters, and that was because they had no other choice in the matter. Furthermore, the bulk of the army was still in the Westerlands, the opposite side of the country to King's Landing. They would have to go through Tyrol lines to reach the capital, and he and Daenerys could deploy 2 adult dragons to bar their route. If I marry her, it could stave off a full-scale invasion, said Rhaegar. But that man she has in her King's Guard, Robert Strong. Who is he, really? Jaime hesitated before answering. I think you already know. I think I do, but I need to hear someone say it, he insisted. He's Gregor Clegane. Rhaegar nodded. Good. Good? Jaime repeated, narrowing his eyes. You're a man back from the dead. Don't waste your second chance at life on Gregor Clegane. I don't intend to, Rhaegar retorted. I just want to kill him. If I achieve his death, I believe it will enrich my second chance at life. A great deal. Oberyn already tried it and had his head pulverized by the mountain using just his bare hands. Jaime hissed. I saw what happened and he raped and murdered my wife, Rhaegar cut in. He butchered my children and has been terrorizing this realm with impunity ever since. Do you think I care if I die as long as I take that monstrous cunt with me? Jaime ran his hands through his hair, the dull light glinting dully off the gold right. When Rhaegar first saw it, he thought it was a strange kind of glove, but now he could see it was an actual gold hand. Where the flesh one had been amputated, he tried not to stare, but he was so surprised he looked just a little too long. Jaime smiled wryly as he held it up for him to see properly. The bloody mummers sworn to Rose Bolton at the time, they captured me and Brienne. Sorry, I didn't mean to stare, replied Rhaegar. Have you retrained to fight with the left? Of course, but I'll never be as good, he answered. I'll still be leading the Lannister troops north once this wedding is done. The two of them fell silent, taking a moment to lose themselves in the view beyond the bay windows. The sun was out now, burning away some of the sea mists and affording them a clearer vista of sea and basalt cliff, at least until a vast winged shadow blotted it all from view, emitting a jet of bright red and orange flame as it flapped into the sky. Startled, Jaime leapt back from the window. Gods have mercy, he cried out, face awestruck, his jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. As though transfixed by what he saw, he soon returned to the window, and carried on watching as Drogon continued his flight. Daenerys was a little white speck clinging to the beast's spines. Is that your sister? What? The dragon or the one on the dragon? Jaime rolled his eyes. Don't try and be funny. You were never funny. Yes, Daenerys is bonded to Drogon. The smaller blue and silver is mine. The other two are riderless, Rizier explained. However, they both answer to Dainty. If she tells them to open fire, they will. For a moment, he didn't think Jaime was listening. He was immersed in the sight of Dany taking Drogon out for his exercise. However, Rhaegar could see the dull glimmer of real fear in those emerald Lannister eyes. Drogon, you say? I say he is Balerion, the Black Dread born again. Not a minute after stating the other two were riderless, Rhaegar slouched his brother with someone desperately clinging on and shouting out loud, angry curses that could just be head over the beating of wings. All the same, a hot and fierce surge of pride swept over Rhaegar. Jon, he said, throwing open the window. That's Ned Stark's bastard, Jaime said. Wrong. He's my bastard, Rhaegar corrected him, leaving out the legitimate part. Mine and Lyanna Stark's. Jaqen choked, but Rache was watching his son's first dragon flight beaming from ear to ear. Ned Bloody Stark? That sly old dog? Jaime muttered. Told everyone it was his bastard. Meanwhile, Jon's first flight had come to abrupt end with a crash landing. Rosier leaned out of the tower and looked directly down to where his son jumped off the dragon's back and now ran across the sands. Probably grateful to still be alive. Now the dragon really had its 3 heads. Well, almost. Rosier closed the window, turning back to Jaime. I hear you did for the old tyrant. Jaime was still shaken from the sight of the dragons in flight. However, the change of subject seemed to draw him out of it. Yaris, he said. There was no triumph in his tone. I wondered when you would bring that up. Oh, don't worry, I'm not angry, Rexarchar assured him. I would like to know the full story, though. Who opened the gates of the city? I thought it would have been Varys. Pikiel, Hime corrected him. Pikiel opened the gates. Remember the wildfire you told me about? Your father was going to detonate it. He sent me out to take my father's head. While in the city, I found Rosier talking to the pyromancers, and I thought he was giving them the order to blow the city up. So I killed him and returned to the Red Keep. Aureus asked me if the blood on my sword was Tywin's. I told him no. It was Rosier's. Aureus climbed the steps to the Iron Throne and was about to declare my death sentence, so I pulled him down and killed him, a sword slashed to the throat. It was over quickly. There was something comforting about the matter-of-fact way Jaime recounted the last humiliating hours of the Targaryen dynasty, something that let him remove himself from it all. But when Laencer fell silent, Rhaegar found himself at a loss for words. What was Rossor doing at the Red Keep? He asked, at length. He should have been with his beloved Wildfire. Oh, you wouldn't have heard. It happened after the Trident. Jaime replied, 2 weeks before the end. Aerys named him Hand of the King. One final act of lunacy, Rhaegar thought. He couldn't imagine what those final hours were like, trapped in the city with that madman threatening to blow the whole place and everyone in it. Who was looking after Ilie and the children? He asked. Shame mingled with fear in Yak's expression. I don't know. She was in Maegor's holdfast with the children. By the time I got there, they were all dead. Princess Rhaenys hid beneath your bed, but Amory Lorch found her. Father ordered it, but he ordered that a pillow be put over the children's faces. He didn't order butchery. Over, all over, lives snuffed out as if they were no more significant than fleas leaping off a dead dog's back. A painful knot formed in Rhaegar's chest, and with the greatest of effort he had to cleave to his belief that children were not responsible for the actions of their parents. Cersei, Aemma, and Tyrion had no say any of it. That night made monsters of us all, Jaime added, his voice hoarse with bitter regret. And Gregor Clegane? He asked. Tell me where you want him, and I'll make sure he's there. Jaime's tone was flat, passionless. What I mean is, if you want him incapacitated before you kill him— No, Rhaegar interjected. No, I want to kill him in a fair fight, and I want to see the blood drain from that malignant mountain of flesh. Do you understand? Your Grace, there is added pain, Jaime insisted. Just order the damn execution. No. The finality of his tone almost echoed, and with the matter settled, Rhaegar sought to steer the conversation back onto safer ground. I know you've been made to suffer for what you did to my father, but I want you to know that I completely understand why you did it, and I attach no blame to you at all. He meant it too. The Arcs had been mad a long time. People had burned by the hundred. A city had come to within a hair's breadth of utter destruction. And when Rhaegar looked up at Yakme, he noted how the other man's eyes now misted. Something fell away from him, like a burden had at least shifted or lessened in weight. While he had been dead, the others who had the misfortune to survive had grown old without him. They carried their history like a millstone around their necks and harbored their secrets deep in their hearts. No one recovered. They merely learned to live with what they had seen and done in those frantic final hours. All the while, the madman haunted them. The ghost of the Mad King lingering in every chamber, an insidious malignancy hanging over them all. Come, said Rhaegar. Let's sort these terms out and get this wedding planned. Jon wants it done as soon as possible. A dark shadow passed over Jaime's face, as though he already knew something was afoot, but did not want to say. Before we go, Your Grace, the Lord Commander told me what was happening north of the wall. Lady Brienne vouched for him, and I trust her with my life. But I'd like to hear it from you, as well. What are they? What do they want? The others? Asked Rhaegar. Without waiting for an answer, he continued. Who knows, Sir Gaima? All I know is, they're real, and they've been moving slowly southwards for a long time. As soon as this is done, we will take our armies and our dragons north, to the lands of always winter, and fight to the last man until they're pushed back into oblivion. Whatever the Lannisters were, they were a logical bunch, and everything about the coming wars flew in the face of that steadfast logic. All the same, Jaime nodded. Before we begin, there's someone I must speak with. Tyrion is in the Windworm Tower, but forgive me, you cannot be alone with him. We will not hand him over to you. No, Ymir cut in, abruptly. No, not Tyrion. I need to see a woman who saved my life at a time when I didn't even know it needed saving. Rhaegar raised the ghost of a smile. You better go, then. Jon was still weak in the legs by the time he made it back to the drum keep. Before going in, he paused at the top of the steps to look back at Rogier, now splashing in the sea. While his first attempt at flying hadn't been a complete disaster, he couldn't imagine for a minute how he was supposed to take the creature into battle. Meanwhile, his aunt flew that hulking beast as if it was second nature. She was up there still, training Drogon for combat by unleashing his flame into the open sea. Once back inside, he found Sansa speaking quietly with delegates from Cersei's small council. They had all been treated with courtesy and provided for according to their rank. Everything done according to the books. After a minute, Sansa noticed his arrival and broke off the conversation to join him. How did the flight go? She asked. Jon hesitated before answering. Let's just say I'm glad there were, but only a few witnesses. Now come, I would speak privately with you. Nodding her assent, he let her lead the way out of the back of the drum keep and into a walled garden beyond. Aegeon's garden, if he remembered rightly, sat a bench, was Brienne of Tarth, speaking with Sir Jaime Lannister. Only he looked up as they approached, and looked at Jon in such a way that made him suspect Rhaegar had told him the truth of who he was. However, Lannister soon lost interest and returned to the conversation with Brienne after bidding good day to Sansa. Once back in another tower, one Jon didn't have the name of, they found an empty chamber with only dust and damp inside it. Marwyn, the Brotherhood, and Melisandre have all reached Castle Black, she said, sitting in an old window seat. It gave them a view over the garden they had just left. Adria wrote to tell me. It brought him some small comfort to know that reinforcements were already arriving at the watch. Good. How is Arya? After years on the run, I thought managing Winterfell would be all the harder for her. No, she's fine, she assured him. But she needs a new maester, and they're sending your old friend Samwell. He has no chain yet, but Marwyn recommended him. Jon breathed a deep sigh of relief. While Marwyn sounded harmless, Jon didn't know him personally, which he meant he didn't trust him either. I don't care about the damn chain. Sam will look after her and have a care for the interests of the small folk. He's a good man, Sansa. He knows what's coming as well as any of us. Much like the Targaryen dynasty itself, there wasn't much left of Aegon's gardens. Just a few green shoots protruding from the neglected soil and a sorry-looking rosebush. There was almost nothing for Brienne and Jaime to look at, Jon noted, but they seemed rather content with each other. Both he and Sansa were watching them, their hands now touching. There's history between those two, he said. I remember him in Winterfell, and I thought he was the king. He looked like one, and he was so bloody arrogant. They had shared a brief conversation in which Jon felt himself being pointedly needled by the Knight. The Night's Watch had come up, and Lannister had taunted him. Don't worry, it's only for life. Jon had to hand it to him. He was right. He seems to have changed a lot, said Sansa, only vaguely interested. I've heard he won't be at the wedding, which might be beneficial to us. Jon shrugged. Even if he stays, what difference will it make? They had hammered out the plan between them already. The lords were arriving from the north in the Riverlands and the Vale, many sailing from White Harbor and Gulltown as they spoke. The lords themselves were there under the pretense of attending the wedding and observing a proper coronation. But Jon was still nervous. There was still so much that could go wrong. Is your mother coming down? He asked. Sansa nodded. I don't think she would miss this for the world. During a natural lull in the conversation, Jon shifted closer to her so he could reach her hand. This close, he could catch the scent of her rosewater and feel the warmth of her body against his own. While organizing his own thoughts, he glanced around the room they were in. It large, empty, and full of the smell of neglect. It seemed even Stannis, for all his years in Dragonstone, hadn't bothered much with this room. The three-headed dragon of House Targaryen was still carved into the roof beams. When this is all over and the war is fought, he began, I would like us to marry. He heard the breath hitch in her throat. Do you mean it? Yes, he replied, turning to face her. I would marry you tomorrow if circumstances were different. Why don't we? She asked. This is my third time, so I don't want any fuss. We could go before the Heart Tree or get a septon. Rosier and Daenerys will act as witnesses. Third time, he repeated, but it's the first time you've agreed to be wed, and that counts for something. Plan it. Have everything you want. Because first or third time, it's going to be our final time. And when the War for the Dawn is at its height, when I'm surrounded by fire, death, and destruction, I want to know I have a wedding to live for, a future to fight for. I want to know I have you. Sansa's gaze met his own, reminding him of her brilliantly blue eyes. They were misting now, though, and her lower lip trembled as she tightened her grip on his hand. You will always have me. Come war. Come peace. Come the end of the world. Before that, they had another wedding to negotiate, or at least appear to. Everyone who mattered gathered in the drum keep. Jon and Sansa sat side by side at the high table, with Ser Davos and Sarah Barristan either side of them. Opposite was Jaime and Rhaegar, alongside a chainless maester, introduced as Qyburn. Although curious about how he had lost his chain, he hadn't asked. Instead, he listened as Qyburn relayed how Robb and his men had saved his life at Harrenhal after the Lannisters had sacked it. Strange, then, that he came to be on Cersei's small council. Daenerys was present also, staring fixedly at the door. For his part, Varys stayed out of it, but kept a place at table. Only Tyrion was absent. The trust between brothers, it seemed, broken beyond repair. We all know why we're here, so I suggest we get these terms agreed between us. Yami opened up proceedings. You've read the Queen's requirements already, I assume. Now tell me yours. With Rhaegar and Daenerys royalty in name alone, it was Sansa who was the highest ranking of them all. So it was she who set forth their terms. I agree that this marriage should go ahead. We cannot afford to waste time fighting with Cersei, so we must unify. I agree to swear fealty to her as my queen, and I assure her I will command my bannermen to also swear fealty and renew their loyalty to the crown. However, I will only do so once the marriage is consummated and legalized. I agree that Tyrion Lannister will be brought to Queen Cersei in chains, again only after the marriage has been consummated and is valid in the eyes of the gods old and new. In return, we would like Sir Robert Strong, formerly known as Gregor Clegane, to be handed over to us to face trial for the murder of Elia Martell and Prince Aegon. When she finished, Jon spelled out his own requirements. I would like the Lannister forces to be on the road, north before the marriage. It is imperative that our armies join forces and go north with all haste. Jaime looked skeptical. You would have my sister undefended in the capital surrounded by your troops, while her own are already gone from the city. I see your point, Jon ceded. Ideally it would happen, but if that is unacceptable to you, then by all means let them stay. They would be overpowered in no time. My own forces, the Unsullied and the Dothraki, Dany stated. Your sister requires that I send them away. I will agree to leave them stationed on Dragonstone, but I regret that I will not be able to muster ships enough for them before the wedding takes place. And the dragons, Rhaegar cut in. I agree to have all 4 dragons confined safely to the dragon pit of King's Landing. But only when the War for the Dawn is over, we need those dragons to head north at a moment's notice. Yaegmia listened while someone else, Qyburn, noted down every word that was said. They had to pause every so often, allowing the man time to catch up. But here, Yaegmia spoke again. You can understand that my sister is nervous about having live dragons on the loose, he stated. She wants them secured in the pits. They're not on the loose, said Rogier. They will be left at Dragonstone, where they will do no harm to anyone. These are our terms, Cersei added. If the queen does not agree, the wedding is off, and we will have no choice but to attack. Jon watched as Jaime drew a deep breath, running his good hand through what was left of his hair. His pallor had taken a grayish hue. Now, but their deal was finally on the table. I don't think anyone has anything else to add to that, he said. Take it to the queen and let us know what her final decision is. With that, he got up and left. The sooner this sordid business was concluded, the happier he would be. The galleys all set sail at once, moving into formation as they hit the open seas. On the vessel out front, Jon made his way to the prow of the ship to watch as the brisk wind filled the silk sails. Among the fleet sailed the mermen of White Harbor. A couple of Greyjoy longships displayed the Kraken, and the crescent moon of the Vale sailed alongside them. He saw some of his own, the 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen. Although the landlocked Starks had no fleet of their own, Wyman Manderly's newest vessel, the Lady Sansa, now hoisted a direwolf sail in her namesake's honor. And it was on that ship that she and he now sailed toward the yawning jaws of Blackwater Bay. Never in his life had he seen such a fleet, and, he had to admit, it was stirring. Had they been sailing into battle, it would be more so. But as it happened, they were sailing into nothing more than a wedding. A royal wedding with all the pomp and ceremony that went with it, and the prospect alone tired him out. While out on deck alone, he remembered the last time he spoke to the ghost of Highheart. A memory that popped into his head and gave him a jolt in the stomach. You arrive a guest and leave a king, she had told him. Was that why he had pushed his father into this marriage? At some unconscious level had he taken to heart the words of a mad old crone, and there was so much potential for things to go wrong that last-minute doubts plagued him. No longer willing to be alone with his nerves, he left the prow and returned below deck. It was always cold at sea, colder still now that winter had come, and even the cloak that Sansa had made for him no longer kept out the bitter chill. He descended the steps only to find that Sansa was not in the cabin where he had left her. In there he found only the less than reassuring sight of Catelyn Stark, accompanied by her brother, Lord Edmure. Apologizing for the intrusion, he left to descend lower into the bowels of the ship. His guess was right, and Sansa was kneeling before a barred cage built into the ship's small freight hold. On the other side of the iron bars, Tyrion tried to look as if he was enjoying himself despite being bound in chains. Varys appeared from the shadows of a wine cask with an overflowing cup in hand. You can have this, but no more, he stated, passing the cup through the bars. You must remain coherent. Sansa looked apologetic. He's right, my lord. But look, there's salted beef and some lovely cheeses meant for the wedding feast. Why not have some of that to soak up the alcohol? Fuck the cheese, Tyrion declared. Bring me the cask. Sansa and Varys made room for Jon around the impromptu prison cell. Tyrion, meanwhile, greeted him warmly. My lord, you've come to join the party." Jon felt more than a little guilty. It was bad enough to be locked in a cage on a ship, but the rocking was worse down here than up on deck. "Forgive us, my lord, but we had to do a good job. Although might I suggest that staying sober would be a better idea? Cersei might become suspicious if we're getting you hammered." "You're all determined to ruin the party atmosphere, aren't you?" Tyrion countered, tossing his now empty cup aside. "Oh look, here come more spectators." Daenerys had joined them, flanked by two Unsullied and Little Miss Andy. Rhaegar came up behind her, looking pale and whey-faced with Barristan Salmi at his side. Pre-wedding jitters afflicted his father, or so Jon assumed. "I haven't been the center of this much attention since my father put me on trial," Tyrion said. "I bet you had to be sober for that too," Sansa replied, wryly. "Don't remind me." "What I do want to remind everyone of," Jon cut in, "is what we're meant to be doing. I want us all to make sure that there is minimal damage to people's property, that no one is raped, put to the sword, or molested in any way. Daenerys, the Unsullied, they feel no desire," Daenerys assured him. "They don't understand what it is, they only obey." The Dothraki had been left at Dragonstone, to Jon's relief. "I don't mind plunder, so long as it stops rape and murder. Possessions can be replaced. Lives and honor cannot. However, we must all try to keep control of our own forces as best we can. When a man's blood is up, there will be telling what he'll do," Sir Barristan cautioned. But Jon was adamant. "Rapers will be sent to the wall. Rapers who kill their victims will be hanged. That's my final word on the matter. Make sure they know that." The others murmured their agreement before a cask of ale was opened and they all took a drink to calm their nerves. Even though they were a good day's sailing away from King's Landing, talking about it made it real. The realer it got, the more Jon's nerves nagged at him. The troops were traveling over land, meaning they could be delayed at any turn, and all their plans would come to nothing. As they drew closer and the buildings and streets rolled into view, Jon could see the Queen had not skimped on effort. The Lannister lion now flew proudly alongside the three-headed dragon, a sight that turned his aunt's stomach, but simply left Jon feeling cold. It was there, all along the Red Keep's curtain walls, and red and gold bunting laced the alleyways, interspersing with red and black. By the time they docked, the small council had lined up along the shore to formally welcome them back to the city. Jon and Sansa stood side by side, waiting to be brought ashore on a small sailboat, looking along the lines of faces. Cersei, from what he could see, wasn't among them. He vaguely remembered what she looked like, but Sansa would recognize her instantly. But she was nonplussed too. "I think that's her wheelhouse," she said. "It's the same one she had when I was here and when she came to Winterfell." Before long, the first of the sailboats bumped against their galley, and soon someone was boarding the ship. Sansa groaned as Jon realized who was climbing aboard. He'd somehow managed to forget that she was coming to inspect the goods in person. While her usher announced her, everyone on board knelt on the bobbing deck. Even Jon, as much as it galled him, alongside Sansa, who fell into a well-practiced curtsy. Her Grace, Cersei of House Lannister, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. Cersei didn't waste time. "Rise." As they did so, Jon found himself looking her in the eye. Her hair was shorn, but she still carried herself with a straight-backed haughtiness. But if she was interested in him, it didn't last long as she moved right over to Sansa. Jon studied her carefully, wondering if she really had forgiven his betrothed for her alleged role in Joffrey's murder. Whatever the case, her smile didn't reach her eyes, and Sansa looked right back at her, unblinking and full of silent defiance. "Hello again, little dove," she spoke in a voice as smooth as silk. "What a pleasure it is to have you back at court. You have been missed." "A dove no more, your grace," Sansa answered, "but a warden of the north." Cersei made a noise at the back of her throat, wordless and meaningless. Then relief came in the shape of Rhaegar, who had been dressed in a samite doublet of black and scarlet, matching breeches and tooled leather boots that rose to his knees. An image of chivalry, he bowed before his queen and kissed the ring on her finger. Just for a brief moment, Cersei actually blushed and seemed quite lost for words. "My betrothed," she greeted him, "King's Landing is yours." "My queen," he answered politely. "I pray it will be ours before long." Jon breathed a sigh of relief as Rhaegar played his part impeccably. Once reintroduced to each other, they linked arms and continued their inspection of the guests. Daenerys was the lucky next in line. Your future sister-by-law, your Grace Daenerys Targaryen, Queen of Meereen, Breaker of Chains, and the Mother of Dragons. As a fellow queen in her own right, Dany did not curtsy. She did extend a hand and utter some well-practiced yet double-edged pleasantries. You are very beautiful, your Grace, and may I just say how much I am looking forward to drawing from the wisdom of a far more experienced queen, whose many years will no doubt be of benefit to one such as I. Cersei's smile stiffened, her emerald gaze flickering to Dany's guards. I see you have with you some interesting savages. Your Grace, may I ask their names? When Dany nodded for him to answer, he simply said, "This one is Grey Worm." Cersei looked mildly puzzled. "Sorry, which one?" "This one," Grey Worm repeated. "This one is Ratface," said the other. "They mean themselves, your Grace," Dany said, helping the baffled queen. "It's how they introduce themselves. Charming." Jon disguised his snigger as a cough, which only rebounded on him as Cersei's piercing gaze fell upon him once more. She did not share his amusement. "And I hear I am not only gaining a husband," she said, approaching with a measured pace, "but also a bastard stepson." Behind that rictus smile, Jon could see she wanted nothing more than to see him dead at her feet. A suspicion backed up by what he knew of the massacre of Robert Baratheon's bastards. Whether it was ordered by her or Joffrey, it mattered not, since she made no effort to prevent it happening. Suddenly, Catelyn Stark no longer seemed so bad after all. "And I, stepmother, your Grace," he answered, trying to sound as though he relished the idea. "I believe there is one more you are yet to meet. If you could step this way, we will reintroduce you." This was the part he was dreading the most. As painful as it was for them all to be lined up and inspected, at least they didn't have to endure the indignity of being inspected in a cage while locked in fetters. Jon found himself wishing they had given Tyrion the cask now. Anything to cushion the blow of having the sister who wanted him dead gloating over him from the opposite side of a caged hold. The dwarf kept his head down, and Cersei's triumphant smile was sickening to behold. After commanding her brother to look up at her, she bent her own knees so could take a long and searching look into his face. "That's him," she said happily. "That's definitely him. He will be brought to you after the wedding." "No, I want him now," she cut over Jon. "Bring him with us. I would have this execution done." Before Jon could panic, Rogier took a smooth step into the discussion. "My love, please. Bloodshed before our wedding could only be ill-omened. I want nothing to spoil the happiness of our day." Cersei hesitated. Clearly, the head of Tyrion Lannister would make her extremely happy, but mercifully, she had a groom to impress. "Very well, he is to be held here annal the morning after we are wed. Then my father's sentence of execution will be carried out against him." Breathing a silent sigh of relief, all Jon wanted to do was get off that boat and onto dry land. After that, all they had to do was survive the following day. Sleepless and despondent, Roger lay in bed that night and watched the sky outside his window grow lighter as the sun rose. He remembered his childhood at the Red Keep, when he would watch the sun rising over the Sept of Bueller, casting its shortening shadow over the cobbled streets beyond. In the place where the Sept once stood, now lay only a deep pit, a crater in the street that had consumed not only the Sept itself, but numerous houses and small businesses. Innocent people had been blown sky high, and a noble house of Westeros had been all but wiped out. It was wildfire left over from Ares, the same wildfire Jaime had sacrificed his honor to prevent it being used against the people. Something not lost on the night as he explained to Roga what exactly had happened. Sansa had mentioned it to him, but it wasn't until he saw the scale of destruction that it really sank in. Not for the first time did he wonder whether Ciri had some similar trick up her sleeve for them, too. She could wipe them out and take their army for her own. However, morning broke proper, and servants arrived to rouse him in time for his wedding. A tray of food was placed before him, which he hastily pushed away. Once bathed, he was dressed in a samite doublet, trimmed with cloth of gold. His breeches were a cream samite color, also trimmed with cloth of gold. Cersei had picked it herself, insisting it would bring out his eyes. The night before, they had dined together at a welcoming feast for all the guests. Lords from across the Seven Kingdoms, many of whom had been in open rebellion against the Lannisters, were also there. Each of them nervous, remembering the Tyrells no doubt. Nerves that did not calm until they gathered in the Red Keep's own sept, since Bachelor's was nothing more than a smoldering pile of rubble. The guests were already assembled by the time he arrived, At the front pews, Sansa, Jon, Daenerys, and Edmure Tully sat silently, side by side. Only the first three looked up, silently encouraging him on to the front where the High Septon's head bowed under the weight of his crystal crown. Rhaegar didn't know this one, but he supposed a few had come and gone since he was last here. The last of the guests to arrive was Jaime Lannister, signifying that Cersei could only be a matter of seconds away. He entered discreetly, with a large but handsome woman at his side, dressed in a large pale blue dress. Her blonde hair was neatly arranged. It took Rhaegar a full minute to recognize Brienne of Tarth. When they sat, she positioned herself to Jaime's left, and he suspected it was so they could reach each other's hands. Just then, before he had a chance to wonder for too long, a fanfare blared from the eaves above, heralding the arrival of the Queen. Rhaegar stood up straight, hastily wiping the look of certain doom from his face, as the doors to the sept opened once more. Like any expectant groom, he turned to look over his shoulder as a long shaft of light penetrated the sept from outside. Light into which Cersei stepped, swathed in a gown of snowy white silk and ivory taffeta. In all fairness to her, she did look lovely. In the absence of her father, Qyburn escorted her down the aisle. She came to a halt so close their noses almost touched, and the ceremony began in earnest. "You may now cloak the bride and bring her under your protection." Cersei turned her back to him as Jon handed over the cloak. Out of nowhere, the memory of draping this very cloak over the shoulders of Lyanna Stark hit him like a kick in the stomach. It still smelled musty from where it had been buried in the crypts of Winterfell. It still bore traces of her, like the essence of her had seeped into the weave of the fabric. With shaking hands, he fastened it at the nape of Cersei's neck. After that, she stood to face him. The smile on her face made her look 20 years younger, as if the Robert and the Rebellion had simply never happened. His left hand met her right, whereupon the Septon wove a white silk ribbon around their wrists, as he recited a prayer from the seven-pointed star. "In the sight of the seven, I hereby bind these two souls together as one for eternity. Look upon one another and say the words." Rhaegar thought the words might stick in his throat, but somehow he managed to choke out the final vow, in unison with his new bride. "Father Smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger, I am hers. She is mine. From this day until my last." And it was done. Gods, this day will never end. Sansa sat heavily in the seat beside Jon's. First the wedding itself, then the jugglers, the dancers, the mummers. It never ends. Jon huffed indignantly. The whole thing is not but a mummer's farce. There have been several courses to the feast as well. They picked a little of each before passing them down to the lower tables. It amazed her, even at such short notice, that Cersei had managed to pull off this spectacle. Warily, she looked down the high table of the common hall, to where Rhaegar was looking stricken, as he fed strawberries to his new bride. She was gratified when a servant came to top up his glass, and he covered it with his hand. "Are you not drinking, my love?" she heard Cersei ask. "You've barely eaten a thing." "I think I will be needing my wits about me tonight," he replied. Laughter broke out at the unsubtle innuendo. Like Jon, Sansa had been discreetly feeding her own wine to a nearby potted plant. She glanced around the hall, noticing that many of her lords and bannermen were doing similar, having learned a bitter lesson from the Red Wedding. That had been Walder Frey's advantage. The guests were inebriated, or had at least had their senses dulled. Outside the windows, she could see the light fading against the onset of even fall, and she knew it was almost time. A worry confirmed as Lord Glover approached, with Lord Mallister at his side. When they drew level with her, Glover bent down to whisper in her ear. 1 mile, my lady. Give it an hour." Before they passed, Mallister added, speaking even more quietly and cryptically, "Our wedding present has entered Maegor's holdfast." "Aye, my lord," Mallister confirmed. "Got it looking lovely for her. Rose petals and all." Sansa slid onto the bench beside her and accepted the dagger Catelyn slipped into her hands. She would be needing it soon. Once the weapon was concealed down her boot, she took her mother's hands in her own. "Just under an hour, mother," she said. "Then Robb and all our loyal bannermen will be truly avenged." "Niece," said Edmure, coming to join them at the rear of the hall. "A spider crawled across my hand and left me this." Under the table, he slipped her a large iron key. She had to lean back to get it in view, then hastily hid it down the front of her bodice. Unable to rest, she got up again and circulated among the guests. After a while, she reached the bride and groom to congratulate them one more time. As she did so, she placed a protective hand over the place where the key rested. "7 blessings, your grace," she said, curtsying, "on both of you." She looked to Rhaegar, who met her gaze and nodded his understanding. Cersei, meanwhile, said nothing, but regarded her through narrowed eyes. Behind that fixed smile, Sansa could see she was itching to say something. Only the presence of Rhaegar stayed her tongue. The hour was ending fast, and she sought Jon among the crowds only to find him seated back at their table. He surveyed the crowds in silence, apparently quite relaxed, with his arm resting against the back of the empty seat at his side. Even when a messenger from Lord Manderly whispered in his ear, he barely flinched. Jon rose to his feet and gestured for Sansa to come and stand by his side as he addressed the crowds confidently. "It was time, my lords, my ladies," he called out, smiling hungrily. "The wedding is done and vows have been exchanged. Only crumbs remain of this splendid feast, and the casks are dry to the touch, and that can only mean one thing. It is time for the bedding." His declaration was met with an uproarious cheer. Already the women were crowding around Rhaegar and the men toward Cersei. Only Jon and Jaime Lannister held back. Then a hush descended, heavy and expectant, as Rhaegar rose to his feet and lifted up his glass. "Aye, my lords, to bed it is." No longer enduring all eyes on him, Jon turned to Sansa and she could see the worry in his eyes. "Get to Rhaegar, quick!" There was no fear on that front. Sansa was already rushing up to the prince before any of the other women could reach him. A few of them laughed at her, teasing her for her haste in stripping the prince as he was borne to his marriage bed. All she did was pretend to laugh along as she barreled Rhaegar through the back door, just as the men hoisted Cersei onto their shoulders, carrying her through the other door amidst a barrage of bawdy jests. Sansa was still laughing as she pulled off Rhaegar's doublet and flung her arms around his waist, as if preparing to lift him. Quickly she lifted the key Edmure had passed her and slipped it down the waistband of Rhaegar's breeches. "Go now, the soldiers have arrived," she said once they were out of sight of the main hall. "There's a horse saddled and harnessed, waiting for you at the back. Make haste, and good luck." The other women followed, little Lyanna Mormont among them. "My mother and sister were killed at the Red Wedding. Do this, and House Mormont will be very, very grateful," she hissed at the prince. He looked a little scared, as he promised to do his best. The other women they had handpicked from among their lords. The other was poor Lackwit Lady Lollies, who simply wouldn't have a clue what was going on anyway. They led Rhaegar down a passageway, away from Maegard's holdfast, pulling off his clothes only to replace his silks with a mail shirt and breastplate. Sansa handed him the sword Varys had hidden in an alcove. "Have a care, my lady," he said, kissing her cheek. "Take refuge where you can." Sansa waited until he was out of sight before returning to the other ladies. They were women of the north, and they well knew how to take care of themselves. And Lady Lottie's. Cersei's spirits soared as she was borne up the stairs of Magor's holdfast on the shoulders of a rowdy crowd of men drawn from the Westerlands and the Riverlands. Her jealousy at seeing those women pawing at her husband soon faded as she returned the bawdy japes and jokes, giving as good as she got. It was a world away from the day she married Robert, when they'd almost had to drag her up the steps. When finally they lowered her before the door of her bedchamber, she stood on shaking legs and she looked at the closed door. Breathless with anticipation and excitement, she hesitated before going through it. He was in there waiting for her, her silver prince. After all these years and a miracle from the gods had brought him back to her, just as good, she had brought to pass her father's original plan for her, and Rhaegar was now her husband. Hopeless. Doidiadier was still dead. That wild wolf girl was still dead, but he was here, and she had survived. How could this be anything but a blessing from the Seven upon her reign? Better, she still bled. She would give him sons, beautiful silver-haired, lilac-eyed little boys. She would have to do something about their bastard brother, but that could wait. For now her prince awaited. "Make haste, your grace," a Riverlord urged her. "We have a very special wedding present awaiting you inside." She knew he was right, but she wanted to relish feeling like a giddy girl again. With a shudder of horror, she remembered Orania Waters. A callow, skinny youth she had once considered taking to her bed because he reminded her of Regan. Back then, she could never have imagined that the real thing was being sent back to her by the gods themselves. With a thrill of excitement, grinning from ear to ear, she finally pushed open the chamber door. The outer chamber was silent, but a soft yellow glow of oil lamps permeated from below the door to her privy chamber, rendered speechless with excitement. She tiptoed, barefoot now, thanks to the men outside, all the way up to the door. "I have come, my love," she said in a sing-song voice, inching the heavy oak door open. The men who brought her here and stripped her down to her petticoat and shift, now both garments whispered down her thighs and pooled at her feet, naked as my name day and loins burning for my one true love. Silence, but she could see through the muslin drapes shrouding her bed, a shadow figure laying on his back. Scented candles burned on every surface of the room, the floor strewn with sweet-smelling rose petals, blue winter roses that filled the air with sweetness, but still no reply from her beloved. Sensing she was being teased, she stifled a laugh. "You're teasing me. If you don't stop now, I may have to spank you." She pulled open the drapes, ready to pounce on her silver prince like a half-starved lioness. Only he was not there, leering up at her from among the silk cushions and petals, bound in unlocked chains. The mismatched eyes of her monstrous brother met her own. Horrified, she staggered back, choking on her own screams of horror, as the misshapen little creature rose slowly from the bed. "You whore," he hissed, low and icily dangerous. "You evil, vindictive, malicious old whore." Cersei reeled back, tripping over the Marish rug, hitting the ground with a violent jolt. She finally screamed aloud. "Help!" she cried. "Help me, please! It's escaped!" Then the breath caught in her throat, a very special wedding present. They had said. The betrayal swelled inside her. She wanted to be sick. She wanted to claw the little freak's mismatched eyes out. But the chain swung and slammed into her belly, knocking her straight back down as she tried to rise. Before she could scramble back to her feet, he was on her, wrapping his hands around her bare, pale throat. In a raw panic, she reached up and grabbed a fistful of his hair, trying to pull him off. Her right hand slammed into his face, but she could not throw him off. "You whore," he repeated, tightening his grip with inhuman strength. He was crying, a tear slipping from his eyes and splashing on her burning cheek. "You utter fucking whore." She tried to scream out, but Tyrion's stubby little fingers were crushing her windpipe. Her strength was flagging fast as Maggie's words returned to her once more. "She should have killed the bitch." "Shame," said a young woman's voice. Through the fog of her dying eyesight, Cersei could make out Sansa Stark emerging from the shadows. How very young she was. How very beautiful. "Shame," she said again, watching as Cersei slumped into the oblivion of death. "What a shame." Roger jumped down from the saddle of his horse before he even reached the city gates. Just as Manderley had promised, the army was vast and it was racing toward them at a speed he couldn't guess. But it was bloody fast. Starks, Glovers, Mallisters, Mormonts, Unsullied, all racing towards him at breakneck speed. The horses sounded like thunder. The angry voices brought the storm of vengeance. His hands shook as he struggled to unlock the gates of the city, but he managed it as the first of the host bore down upon him. They didn't even have to break their pace as Rugger threw open the gates of King's Landing in the nick of time. He leapt aside as the furious soldiers, all mounted on huge destriers, came thundering into the city. High overhead, Drogon soared through the darkness, roaring flame into the open air. Dany must have called him after she had sneaked away from the wedding party earlier that afternoon. "Go for the gold cloaks," he shouted to the advancing army. "Go for the city watch. Lannisters will be advancing." Not one of them heard him, but it made him feel as if he was doing something. And he need not have bothered anyway. The gold cloaks stood no chance in the face of the onslaught. By the time Rhaegar was mounted again and charging back through the city streets, they were in retreat. Just like those caught in the Red Wedding, they weren't prepared for this, and most of them had been drinking. However, their Lord Commander was forming them up all the same, barking out commands and threatening to behead deserters. No sooner did they form up than Drogon plummeted through the skies, screaming as he went. Daenerys didn't even have to open fire on them before they scattered to the four winds, and the army was waiting for them, attacking them into a rout as they attempted to flee. With the path back to the Red Keep now clear, Rhaegar galloped his mount through the carnage breaking out all around him. He cut down a guard who tried to block his re-entry. More were sent, scattering courtesy of Drogon, who roared a river of flame high above their heads. With the dragon deployed and the city being sacked, None dared stand in Rhaegar's way as he burst through the castle gates. Breathless, sweating, Rhaegar went straight to the common hall where fighting had broken out between Cersei's men and the Northmen. But Jon was leading the way, pushing the enemy from the doors and marshalling his troops expertly. There was only one that Rhaegar sought, however. He had seen him during the wedding feast, lurking on the sidelines, and he found him fighting in the common hall. He was advancing on Jon with a speed that defied his sheer bulk, until Rhaegar launched himself between them. "Well then, Gregor," he panted, breathlessly. "It's me you want, and it's you I want." That was enough talk. He slashed at Gregor with his sword, aiming for the throat. Oberyn had made the mistake of toying with the mountain instead of going in for the kill. Rhaegar had no intention of making the same mistake, nor did he need a confession. He knew what the mountain had done. To urge him on in the fight, all he had to do was hear Elia's screams, conjure the image of his son being smashed into the wall to the point where he was just pulp and bone. Little Rainseas with 100 thrusts of a sword. Fury blinded him as he laid into the mountain, whose strength soon ebbed thanks to his bulk. He got slower where the anger of a grieving father only made Rhaegar stronger. He aimed for the head, the middle, the chinks in the armor that encased that vast, malignant flesh. All around them, men were fighting their way out of the hall, but the few Lannister troops and fewer loyalists were soon throwing their swords at Jon's feet, yielding to him. But Gregor could not yield, and Rhaegar pressed on. "Leave him! He's mine!" he bellowed, whenever anyone stepped in to help. He slashed the sword at the breastplate so hard it pierced the armor, sinking into the flesh below. "For Alia," he bellowed, snatching up another sword from a fallen Lannister. The distraction was just enough for Gregor to get a cut of his own in. It scraped Rhaegar's abdomen, piercing his own breastplate and drawing blood. But he didn't feel it. He aimed for the throat, just under the gorget, as the mountain swung a gauntleted fist at his head. "For a Yegon," he hissed, skewering the mountain under the chin. Another cut him in the join between breastplate and shoulder, cutting him deeply. But Rhaegar's second blow to Clegine's gorget had dislodged the mountain's helm. Seizing his advantage, he slashed the sword at Rhaegar's throat so hard his head bounced clean off his shoulders, spurting foul-smelling black blood from a jagged stump. "For Rhaenys," he gasped, exhausted from the fight. The mountain came crashing to the ground, that same black blood pooling around his broken corpse. Rhaegar sank to his knees, choking on his own grief and tears. He closed his eyes for a second, and Rosiernes came to him, running barefoot across the common hall, laughter in her guileless brown eyes. "Papa," she always called him. "Papa." When he opened his eyes again, she was still dead. But so was that animal, and that was all that mattered. The fight was over. Picking himself up, he made his way to the throne room. But his injuries were worse than he realized. Blood leaked from his pierced armor. He was weak and exhausted and just wanted to lie down until he remembered the throne room. He had to get to the throne room. He lurched forwards, pain coursing through him with every step, onwards, with an agonizing slowness. He could only move forwards until he hit the ground and couldn't get up again. It was over. It was all over, now. Cersei was dead and Rhaegar had already abdicated in a sealed document, kept safe on ship. Jon stood at the foot of the Iron Throne, looking up the vast steps of melted swords. He was dimly aware of the others filing into the room behind him, but he did not turn to address them. There was nothing he could say. After the clamor and chaos of the battle, the silence in this throne room was eerie. It seemed to him that even time itself stood still in this moment. All the while, he looked up at the Iron Throne, the jagged swords in silhouette against the silver moonlight spilling through the oriel windows. "It is yours, Jon," said Sansa. "No, it is ours," he thought, but could not articulate into audible words. Without making any conscious decision, his feet walked him forwards. He sheathed his own sword and began to climb the steps, as if in a daze. It seemed to take an awfully long time to reach the top, where the Iron Throne awaited him. Only then did he finally turn to face them, before taking his place among the kings of Westeros. No sooner had he sat down did Sansa approach him with a crown of bronze swords in her hands. She held it up like an offering to a demigod. Robe's old crown, it was the only one they had. She placed it gently on his head. "Jon Targaryen," she said. The first of his name. Whatever else Sansa was, she wasn't High Septon. All the same, this impromptu coronation was enough for his bannermen, and her declaration was met with a roar of approval. The weight of the moment weighed heavily on him as he looked out over the sea of victorious faces, his subjects, his people, his realm. Jon swept the crown from his head, allowing himself a momentary smile of triumph as he walked straight into Sansa's arms. People were watching, but that scarcely mattered a jot as he kissed her deeply. It was a moment or two in which they could savor their victory, to be with each other before their world turned upside down. Again, when they broke apart, he could see the tears in her eyes. Maybe even disbelief that they had finally done it. As for him, he just wanted to forget the wars to come, just for one moment. Meanwhile, some of the lords were beginning to trickle out of the doors. A proper coronation would have to be arranged for as soon as possible. But for tonight, his half a minute up on the throne with a bronze hat on his head had sufficed. A myriad of things he needed to do flitted through his head. He had a Kingsguard to appoint, a small council to form. He needed a new hand, and he needed to raise every lord, to raise every bannerman to march on the wall. After the passing of the euphoria, it really didn't take long for the reality to come barreling in. "Your Grace!" It took Jon a few seconds to realize it was he who was being addressed. "Your Grace!" Hoping to keep the world at bay for a few moments longer, he still couldn't bring himself to look away from Sansa. "Your Grace, come quickly." Belatedly, he had noticed the shift in the atmosphere. The celebrations had died out suddenly, voices petering into silence as a crowd formed in the outer gallery. Jon could just see them through the open door of the throne room. Suddenly worried, he found the lord who had been calling to him. It was Lord Cersei, brought down from the north by Sansa. He was gray-faced and serious. "Come, it's your father." Jon and Sansa exchanged an anxious look. He was trying to second-guess what mischance had befallen Rhaegar while simultaneously denying the worst. Realizing the futility of lingering in ignorance, he made for the door where the crowds were gathered. However, they parted quickly, forming a path to where Rhaegar had collapsed on the polished oak floor. Blood pooled from a wound in his abdomen. He tried to pull of his breastplate before falling, denting it more as he hit the ground. A bloodied sword was at his side, but whether it was his father's or someone else's, Jon had no way of knowing. "When I saw him last, he was fighting the Mountain," someone said. A few men tried to help, but the prince chased them off. Jon could well believe that. Between Rhaegar and the Mountain, things were personal. What he couldn't believe was that his father had been brought back after 20 years, only to die here. Now, not when the realm was barely unified, not when they were within touching distance of taking on the others, not when he, Jon, had come to love having a real father back in his life. "No," he murmured, dropping to his knees at his father's side. Rigzir's blood soaked into the knees of his breeches. "No, he can't be dead. He can't. He's only just come back." He pressed his fingers to the side of his father's neck, warm but without so much as a trace of a pulse. His skin was waxy, cooling rapidly as the second life drained away. To Jon, it didn't seem possible. "Get a maester," he commanded, desperation growing. "Get a silent sister. Get anyone who can help." His command was met with running footsteps, and he could only assume they were heading for the nearest master. But already he knew it was too late for that. All the same, Jon shook Rhaegar by the shoulders, as if he'd simply chosen a bad place to take a nap. Voices rose again, accompanied by the subdued shuffling of feet as the crowds parted to let someone else pass. Jon looked up to see who it was and found Lady Stark looking down at him from over the top of the shawl she wore to hide her face. Cautiously, she knelt beside him, covered his hands with her own. Not so long ago, he would have recoiled from her, but now he was too desperate to care. He hoped she would take the hint and get out of the way, but she didn't. Instead, she looked back at him, lowering the shawl to reveal the horror of her face. "Fire," she said, covering the wound at her throat. "Rosier." Catelyn gave no answer. Getting back to her feet, she tried to lift Rhaegar herself, gripping him firmly under the armpits, and attempting to haul him up. Jon stepped in, taking over, and gesturing for Ser Barristan to get his feet. Even in death, there was little room for royal dignity. And Rhaegar was carried like a sack of turnips back into the throne room where he could be placed away from the crowds. Catelyn followed them in, closing the doors behind her. They were about to set him down in the middle of the room, but Catelyn threw out her hands to stop them. There were beacons lit along the walls, the only fire in the place. It would have to suffice. They brought Rosier as close as they could, laying him down between two of the beacons. Meanwhile, Sansa had returned with the Silent Sister. Between them, they carried a pail of water to wash the wounds. As soon as the pail was set down, the Silent Sister was herded out of the room. "What are you doing?" asked Jon, growing more suspicious. "We need her." "She led the Brotherhood without banners," Sansa reminded him. "They're all followers of Rockler, even her." "But does she know what she's doing?" Jon asked, keeping his voice down so she wouldn't hear. "I mean, I'm sure she saw Thoros doing it all time, but it's not the same thing." "Maybe he taught her," she replied. "I mean, she led them with Thoros. He must have taught her. And Beric can do it too." Regardless of what they thought, it looked to Jon like she was going to attempt it anyway, and seeing as it was their one last desperate attempt to save Rhaegar's life, he saw no valid reason to try and stop her. Uneasy, nervous, he stood back and watched as she slowly, almost lovingly prepared the body. Her fingers, still nimble, removed the battered and bloodied mail shirt to reveal bare, bruised skin beneath. Jon felt his body tense as Catelyn cut away some of Rhaegar's hair. Dropping it into the nearest beacon, the smell of it soon filled the air, acrid and bitter. Behind him, the doors opened, breaking his concentration just as the beard trimmings followed the hair cuttings. It was Ser Davos, looking worried and pale. He came to a halt beside Jon just as Catelyn leaned down close to Rhaegar. So close they were at kissing distance, and closer still until her mouth met his and blew into his lungs. Sansa gripped Jon's hand, squeezing it as the tension got to her too. For his part, he held his breath and closed his eyes. Somewhere at the back of his mind, a voice whispered wordlessly, almost soundless. Rosier tried to grasp at the meaning, but it was like catching smoke. He tried to open his eyes, only to be dazzled by the brilliant sunshine that was beating down on him, sun strong enough to make the ground on which he lay uncomfortably hot. Making matters worse, every time he breathed in, he inhaled dust and sand. After another minute, he came to coughing and choking on the stuff, while still having the presence of mind to shield his eyes from sun. The mountains spread out all around him, silent and miles from anywhere. Even small movements, like scuffing a stone with the toe of his boot, carried down steep inclines and across the jagged peaks. Slowly, his last conscious memories leaked back into his conscious mind. He married Cersei. He opened the gates of the city. He killed the mountain. He missed his son's coronation. And now he was here, in the mountains, displaying an impressive knife wound through a shirt that had been torn open. The ragged edges were stained with blood, making him quite a disconcerting sight. Almost self-consciously, he clutched the two halves of the shirt together and tried to get his bearings. The Red Mountains of Dorne, he realized. Was this someone's idea of a joke? Wait for him to get stabbed and then dump his unconscious body in the back arse of nowhere? He wasn't amused. He would be lucky if he didn't die from thirst before finding the nearest village. Still, he had to try. Not exactly brimming with confidence, he set off down the road he had woken up on. It was narrow, more a dirt track than anything else, but he'd been to the Red Mountains often enough to know it would eventually lead somewhere. Clumsily, he lurched forward and found himself near falling down the mountainside, but he didn't mind, just so long as he was moving forward. Although still open and raw-looking, his wounds didn't pain him as much as he thought they would. A small mercy that he sent up a silent prayer of thanks for. Then he reached lower, flatter ground, and he began to form an inkling where he was. He came to an abrupt halt, looking quickly in each direction. Why here? He wondered to himself. Ned Stark destroyed the Tower of Joy, and there would be nothing to see. What exactly was going on? He slew the mountain. The memory still made him happy as he recalled how his head bounced clean from his body. In the heat of the fight, he had not felt his own wounds. Only after, when it was done and his heart rate slowed, did the pain begin, and it dawned on him how serious the situation was. Then he woke up here. Hadn't something similar happened to Jon? Rosier looked all around him again. These were not the Mountains of the Moon. This was definitely Dorne. He turned a corner in the road, watching as the Tower of Joy veered into view, and everything stopped making sense. "Oh shit," he said aloud. Shaking now, he ventured close enough to get the bodies in view. They were lined up neatly along the base of the wall, shrouded in soiled white sheets. Some had been buried in freshly dug graves, while the rest waited their turn. He took a moment to gather himself before approaching Arthur Dayne, kept in the shadows away from the sun. Even so, the smell of death was rank in the air. Blood blackened and congealed in the dirt beneath their bodies. You should have guessed that this would happen? Thinking he was alone, a startled Rhaegar whipped around to where a man dressed in black approached him, accompanied by a young lad with auburn hair and piercing blue eyes. "Are you talking to me?" he asked. "Who else?" the old man asked. Then the young lad spoke. "There's nothing to be afraid of. I'm Bran, Jon's cousin." "Sansa's brother," Rhaegar added. It was a small relief he clung to. "I've heard of you." Rosier looked twice at the old man. One red eye, pale skin, and a wine-stained birthmark spreading down the side of his face. He knew a song about Brynden Rivers. With his 1,000 eyes and one, but he had a feeling now was not the time to sing it. "I can't be dead if I'm back here," he said. "Where is Lord Stark?" "He's gone to Starfall," answered Bran. "He will bury the rest when he returns, after the graves have been dug and his sister is boiled to the bones." Lyanna, Rhaegar's heartbeat palpitated as he set off for the tower steps. Both of the newcomers called him back, but he ignored them. Taking the steps 2 at a time, he rushed into the tower and found her in a room on ground level. The room was dark and cold, protecting her body from the heat outside. She was dead already, causing the breath to catch in his throat. Laid out on a stone slab, she looked like she was sleeping, her hair a dark shadow falling over the shoulder of an ivory-colored night rail. A sound came from antechamber, crackling and a slow warmth spreading under the closed door. He inched it open, peering inside at a huge vat of water that was slowly being brought to the boil. Steam was rising already, curling into the poor light. In there, Lyanna's flesh would be boiled from her bones, leaving just a skeleton to be buried in the crypts of Winterfell. Closing the door again, he returned to Lyanna's death chamber, finding her no longer alone. Brain Stark and the three-eyed crow had followed him and stood over her like an honor guard, watching in silence. "I want to be alone with her," he said. "Wherever I go from here, to death, or whatever, I just want to say the goodbyes I never got to say when she was alive." He touched her hair, brushing it back from her brow. Her night rail was clean, but her legs were still bloodied from childbirth. "Where is Jon?" he asked. "With Howland Reed," the crow answered. "They're upstairs, but there's a silent sister heading straight for us. She can't see us, but she can see you." "What?" Before the crow could even repeat what he said, the young sister opened the door and almost gasped in shock at the sight of him. Rhaegar had to think quick. "It's all right, sister," he assured her. "Lord Reed asked me, stand guard over her until the water is ready. I'll put her in once it's done. Then you come back in the morning for her." It wasn't as if she could argue with him, so she just left. She didn't so much as glance at the other two. "That was smooth," said Bran, before changing the subject. "Well, I'll leave you two to talk." Once Bran was gone, Brynden closed the gap between himself and Rhaegar. Like the prince, he came to halt at Lyanna's body, studying her intently for a long moment. "She was the piece of the puzzle everyone forgot about," he said. "Even you forgot her, although you knew she had to be the mother of your child." Rosier Lothathakar felt quite affronted by the accusation. "I never forgot Lyanna, and my wedding to Cersei was a sham. All through that mummer's farce, I thought of Lyanna. It shames me to even think on it." To emphasize the point, he cupped Lyanna's cold face with his hands and leaned down to kiss her brow. "You mistake me, Rhaegar," said the crow, soothingly. "Jon was sent from the future back to this time to unite the 3 heads of the dragon, of which you are one. And he and Daenerys are the other 2. You and he were right about that. But neither of you ever stopped to wonder why he was taken all the way back to Lyanna on that fateful day she returned from visiting Robert at the Eyrie." Trying to second-guess what the crow was talking about, Rosier frowned. "Do you mean why was Jon sent to Lyanna when all he had to do was find me, save me from the trident, and return to his own time?" "It would have been a lot easier," the crow replied. "If that was all he had to do, he didn't need to meet Lyanna at all. He would have woken up a few days before the battle and met you, so on and so forth." "But she's his mother," Rhaegar protested. "He needed to meet her, to learn the truth about himself." The crow shrugged. "The gods care not for family reunions, Rhaegar. They wouldn't have sent Jon years back in time just to find out something." Howland Reed could have told him in a few short minutes. No, there was a much more important reason as to why he was taken to her. He remembered talking to Jaime on Dragonstone, telling him Lyanna was not part of their plan. But she was. He saw that now. It was all there, and he had known it all along without realizing the significance. She was the ice to his fire. That was what led him to her in the first place. She was part of the equation. She was still part of the equation. But before he could speculate further, another question burst into his head. But what about the dragon egg? Rogier asked, out of the blue. Jon needed to hatch it, that's why you showed him Summerhall. We showed him Summerhall because that was when the others began to amass and migrate south, the crow explained. That was all. Your lovely dragon was a pleasant diversion with an unexpected consequence. The dragon only has 3 heads, and yours appears to be the surprise 4th. He was meant to save Lyanna too. You and her together, yours is the song of ice and fire. Rogier could have wept. He would have done had his head not been in such a whirl. Quickly, he had to pull himself together again. Let's just say I put someone else in that boiling vat. I mean, one set of bones looks very much like another, doesn't it? The youngest of them, the Glover boy, is about the right height, the crow stated. And he is of the north and died for House Stark, quite worthy of a place in their crypts. What about Howland Reed? Asked Rhaegar. Ned Stark might be gone, but he'll be back soon, and Howland Reed is still here. The crow laughed. Do you know what Howland Reed was doing before he arrived at Harrenhal? Lyanna had told him. He'd spent a year on the Isle of Faces, studying the old gods and the weirwood trees. He was returning home to the Neck, wasn't meant to be at the tourney at all. When he was set upon by the squires, Leah saved him and fought them off. He realized then that he'd answered his own question. Jojen had the green sight, but all those little Crendogmen had their own way of knowing things. He had suspected all along that Howland knew a lot more than he was letting on. Howland Reed and I are already quite acquainted, the crow assured him. Otherwise Brandon would never have found me. So, Reed knew all along? Rogier asked. When he met Jon at Harrenhal, did he know he was Lyanna's son? The crow shrugged. Quite possibly. Rogier's mind was still racing, flitting from one subject to another. Now it landed on the problem of how to get back. Jon got die again, didn't he? I mean to get back home. So I have to do the same and bring her with me. Hold her tight, your grace, the crow advised. She is more precious than any of you realized. I thought that once our child was born, her role was done, said Rhaegar, almost embarrassed. I should have known. I should have realized from the off. We need her. The crow's words echoed through his head once more. You and her together. Yours is the song of ice and fire. Only if they remain united will the heads of the dragon work together. With his head still reeling, he made his way back outside. Bran was there, greeting him with a warm smile. Do you have a plan? The boy asked. Rogier nodded. I told that silent sister I would tend the body. I'll put Ethan Glover in there, and when she comes back in the morning, there will only be bones. Fill Ethan's grave before you go, said Bran. If it's left empty and open, questions will be asked. Rhaegar flushed in the face. Gods, I hadn't even thought of that. Don't worry about the cairns, said Bran. Father will put them over the graves himself after he destroys the tower. They were about to go their separate ways when Rhaegar called out to him, Your family miss you, Bran. Can I give them a message? He probably had his own ways of sending messages. All the same, the young man stopped and smiled again. I'm coming home, he said. I'll see them at Winterfell. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, Bran was gone, and Rhaegar was alone again. Only the silent sister moved among the dead, removing their clothes and washing the bodies. If he was going to do this, he needed to think of a way to get rid of her. In the meantime, he contented himself with borrowing a bucket of her water to wash Lyanna's body himself, even if only to pass an hour before he could pull off the body swap. Meanwhile, the shrill cries of a baby wailing cut through the air. Howland Reed was standing in a window, cradling the babe in his arms. He looked down, briefly meeting Rhaegar's eyes, a brief flicker of a smile on his face. He held up the baby, showing him the stars popping into the night sky, the red comet shining down on them. Jon, he realized, looking toward an upper window. He is king now. Learning from the mistake she made with Ramsay, Sansa and Jon made sure this regime change was public. A pyre had been constructed in the place where the Sept of Baelor once stood. A great mound of wooden pallets, dry kindling, and discarded driftwood. Slowly, the populace gathered in stunned silence to watch as Cersei's corpse was borne through the streets on a board carried by her twin brother, among others. Not even Jaime grieved openly for her now. He carried her, numb and expressionless. Everyone going through the motions of a proper burial. She was placed beside her creature, Gregor Clegane. The mountain's body had been staked back onto the rest of his corpse. Just like Cersei, there would be no trace of him left behind. Meanwhile, Jon and Sansa moved to stand beside Tyrion and watch the scene from above. "How are you?" she asked, knowing it was a stupid question. Tyrion shielded his eyes from the morning sun and looked up at her. "Free?" She managed to raise a smile. "I suppose you are now, but you should know. Jaime is no longer Kingsguard." He agreed to turn a blind eye to what was happening. "So long as we freed him from his vows and allowed him to take no part in the sack." "I know," replied Tyrion. "Varys told me. He also told me he has no interest in taking Casterly Rock. Apparently, he's far more interested in claiming his own body weight in sapphires." Sansa laughed. Brienne. The brothers hadn't spoken. Clearly, Jaime still hadn't forgiven Tyrion for killing Taxley. Meanwhile, the pyre took flame and Jaime was already walking away, leading Brienne by the hand. Sansa watched them go, swallowed by the crowds that had gathered to watch Cersei burn. "How is Prince Rhaegar and your mother?" asked Tyrion. "I hear reviving Rhaegar took a lot out of her." Despite everything, despite knowing that wasn't really her true mother, it still made Sansa emotional, because somewhere in that ravaged body, some trace of Catelyn lived on. "Melisandre told me they can do it 7 times. "I am sorry to hear it, my lady," he replied. "And what of Rhaegar? I hear it worked, but that he hasn't regained consciousness." "I know now how frustrating it must have been for you," said Jon, as they dined together that evening. "We're just sitting here waiting for something to happen." All the same, the old gods heard them. Jon felt himself being shaken from a deep sleep during the small hours of the morning. He hadn't slept in days and tried to resist, until the messenger mentioned his father. "He's awake, your grace," said the messenger. "Come quickly. Something else is happening." Groggy from sleep, Jon hastily dressed and pulled on the nearest set of clothes he had. He was still trying to lace his boots as he emerged from his chambers and descended the stairs of Maegor's Holdfast. "Wait, has someone woken Sansa?" he asked. "She needs to be here." She had her own apartments now, the same ones once inhabited by Cersei. If the disturbing recent history put her off, she didn't show it. "She's already there, your grace." Without wasting any more time, Jon burst through the doors of Rhaegar's chambers. The two of them met, throwing their arms around each other, holding each other tight for a moment. When Rhaegar pulled back, Jon studied his face intently. He looked pale and weak, but otherwise healthy. This was his second return, and Jon knew each one chipped away at the soul, but Rhaegar was still Rhaegar. "You're all right?" he asked. "We feared you'd be comatose for months, like I was." Over Rhaegar's shoulder and through an antechamber door, he could see Catelyn Stark hunched over a figure in a white dress, both the figures lit by the flames of a small fire. But for the moment, the significance was lost on him as he relished being back with his father. He would thank Catelyn later. "I woke up in the past," said Rogier, "just like you did." Jon almost laughed. "We feared something like that had happened, but thank the gods you were not kept there forever. We need you. We still need you." He was still hurt, but the flames had most healed him. What was left was nothing a good maester could not sort out. "Jon, listen," said Rogier. "It's your mother. We had to jump from the tower to get back here." Jon had been about to say something else entirely, but it went clean out of his head. He looked over Rosier's shoulder again, to where the figure on the floor was now being kissed by Lady Stark. The air breathed back into her lungs as the flames grew around her. "No," he said, stepping forwards to get a better look. "No, this is some joke. Surely." Even as he spoke, Lyanna drew a deep, shuddering breath. A sharp gasp as the life jolted back into her, and she sat bolt upright. Wide-eyed and terrified, she shied from the strangers that surrounded her. Jon and Rhaegar burst through the door together, rushing to catch her, as if they were afraid she would try to run away. In a three-way embrace, their arms wrapped protectively around her. "It's all right," said Rhaegar. "It's all right, my love. We'll tell you everything. Just stay calm." Jon drew back, allowing them some space, and turned to where Catelyn had collapsed. She barely had the strength to bring Rhaegar back, never mind Lyanna too. Now she lay in Sansa's arms, what was left of her life, draining rapidly away. The enormity of what she had done hit Jon square in the gut. Sansa wept openly as she cradled her mother's dying body, rocking her gently. The last time he and Catelyn spoke, he had not answered the final question she asked of him. With Rhaegar back and Lyanna slowly recovering not 2 feet away, Jon felt the time had come to give the answer, and he gave it freely. "I forgive you for everything," he said, reaching for her hand. She met his gaze for just a moment, letting him know she had heard before her eyes finally closed for good. Restless and anxious, Jon paced the length of the outer gallery. Beyond the bay windows, the darkness faded into a pallid gray morning, a slow transition he used to measure the passage of time. It seemed to him this night had lasted a week. Clouds formed overhead, their black underbellies swelling with the promise of rain, and lots of it. He paused for a moment, trying to gauge the temperatures. Before too long, those rains would freeze and even the south would be blanketed in snow. Behind him, the door opened, and he spun on his heels. But it was only a servant. She dipped a curtsy to him, something he was still wasn't used to it, while wiping bloodied hands on her white pinafore. Without a word, she scurried away into the labyrinthine passages of the Red Keep. He watched her go, trying not to imagine what was happening behind those doors to the inner chambers. Rosier had brought Lyanna back in one piece, just about, but no one realized she'd died after having her belly cut open to free the baby inside her, to free him. She had returned with the wound still open, and the fear they thought was in her eyes turned out to be pain. Subdued with milk of the poppy, the maesters were now doing their best. He was a steward, a ranger, a lord commander, and a king. But he was no surgeon, and the life of his mother was in someone else's hands, leaving him hanging there useless and hopeless. Just before the dawn, Sansa joined him, red-eyed and pale. She sat by him in silence. The fact of her being there was enough to bolster him. He managed to sit beside her for a while, holding her hand in his own. The fact that she had lost her mother for the second time wasn't lost on him. It was enough to make him set his own worries in proportion. "We will return Lady Catelyn to the rivers," he promised her. "I've commissioned a boat to be built especially, but Edmure will oversee it to make sure all is done according to Riverland's custom." Sansa managed a wan smile. "Thank you. I will make the sail." He had never seen a Riverland's funeral before, but knew what it entailed. The deceased were placed in a boat surrounded by some of their treasured possessions. Once set afloat, a flaming arrow was loosed at the sail, sending the boat and body up in flames. There was no time to take Catelyn back to the rivers she had known as a child. The Blackwater rush would have to suffice. They would take her as far upriver as they could and lay her to rest there. "What of Aunt Lyanna?" "They're patching her up," he answered. "She should be all right. She wouldn't be having any more children, though. Although that cut a lot of complications that could arise from a crown prince bearing more sons. The only sons who mattered now would be the ones he had with Sansa and any Dany might produce, but they would have Dragonstone, and the eldest might even take Meereen, extending Westerosi influence across the Narrow Sea. "I don't know about Royeger's marriage to Cersei," he said. "Consummated or not, it was still a form of wedding, wasn't it?" "It's only valid if consummated," Sansa insisted. "He never sealed the union, so it really was just silly play acting." Satisfied, Jon shrugged. "I suppose his first valid marriage to Lyanna negates anything he did with Cersei anyway. A Targaryen king once had 2 wives, Aegon the Conqueror. But when Maegor the Cruel tried to pull the same trick, civil war almost broke out and the Faith Militant formed. The same Faith Militant that had proved a thorn in Cersei's side once she decided to arm them again. They also had gone up in fire and ash as the Sept of Baelor was blown sky high. So at least Cersei had staunchly corrected her biggest mistake before his army stormed the city. "You ought not worry about it," said Sansa. "Anyway, did you not hear what Rhaegar said about Bran? He will be waiting for us at Winterfell." Jon smiled. That was one thing that made his heart a little lighter. I heard also that he is very close with Lady Reed." Sansa nodded. "I think before too long there will be another wedding. A real one. This time. After all the pretend ones, it's time someone had a real one," he agreed, laughing. "You, me, Arya, and Bran, all together again. It'll almost be like the old days again." Her smile faded, sadness creeping back up on her. "I know you're right, but I don't think it will ever be like the old days again. Not without Robb or Rickon or father and mother." "Emphasis on the almost," he pointed out. "But we cannot mourn for what's already been and gone. All we can do is aim for the future and hope we shoot the arrows straight." Before that, the war against the others loomed large. It was a frozen obstacle, barring the path between him and whatever the future held. He couldn't see a way past it or around it, which meant a deadly head-on assault. Not long after dawn, the doors to the inner chamber opened again. Rotiger appeared, looking tired and pale, but he was happy. He greeted them both with a smile. All is well, he announced to the gallery at large. Jon breathed a sigh of relief, leaning back against his seat as the burden fell from his shoulders again. Thank the gods, can I see her? He kissed Sansa goodbye before ducking under his father's arm. Through the door, Roger held open for him. To his further relief, Lyanna was sat up in bed and seemingly rather happy. A bloodied night trail of ivory silk was hanging over the back of a chair, the only piece of evidence to tell of what had happened in the room. The air carried the iron tang of blood as well, but fresh herbs were now burning in the freshly stoked fire to freshen the place up. Jon, she said, looking up at him. Her eyes followed his progress across the room. How are you? She asked as if he was the one who'd spent the evening having his insides sewn back into his belly. He almost laughed. I am really quite well, Mother. It's you everyone's a little more worried about. I knew you would come back for me. Her voice was weak, and up close he could see a soft sheen of sweat beading her brow. It was Rhaegar, he pointed out gently. But had it been in my power, I would never have left you behind in the first place. Jon settled in a chair at her bedside, where he could speak with her privately after sending the servants away. Only Keedburn remained, the non-master who had patched her up. He lurked in the shadows, where Jon turned to thank him. Robb Stark saved my life, he repeated once more. It pleases me to have been of service to your grace. With that, he left. Jon still didn't know what to make of him. He appeared loyal to Cersei. He even brought back the mountain. However, he didn't think on it for too long before turning back to Lyanna. It seems like I birthed you yesterday, she said, her voice distant. I feel like I birthed you yesterday, fully formed and adult as you are. She meant it as a jest, but it was weirdly true. But I know it happened, Rhaegar told me. I know it happened a long time ago. But what am I now? I was but 16, and you are now older. You've missed 20 years, he said, sorrowfully. Rhaegar woke up as a 44-year-old. Now this is old, she remarked dryly. But, whatever the case, I'm glad I am back now. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Your reign, your war, your triumph. And I know you will triumph. I wish I shared your confidence, he retorted. Her brow creased. But you've already done a lot of groundwork. That's why you were sent back to the past, to my time. It was all part of the fight against the others. You reunited the heads of the dragon, you hatched the fourth, and you've used what you learned there to take the realm today. You're already winning, Jon. When you put it like that, his words trailed off as he went through it all again. So much had happened in the months since he returned to his own time and place, but it had all advanced him forward. But with him, there was always the doubts. Doubts gathering and lengthening with the setting of the sun. Even so, I now have a whole realm to protect. It felt easier when it was just the wall and Castle Black. Now it's all 7 kingdoms, and everyone in them. As with before, when he was with Lyanna in the past, he found himself speaking easily to her. Even before he knew she was his mother, she invited confidences, and she did so. Even with her obvious discomfort and disorientation at being propelled into a frightening future she knew little about, she still made time for others and made him feel as if he mattered. You're not alone, Jon, she assured him. And it's not up to you to save the whole realm and everyone in it. It's only up to you to convince the whole realm that they need save themselves now. It shouldn't be too difficult to convince people to save their own hides. Jon chuckled, but there was more than a grain of truth in what she was saying. A small note of comfort. Everyone would be affected by the upcoming war. What was once, to most people in the South, a scary Hearthside story would soon become a nightmarish reality. No one would be able to deny it then, but he wanted to do it before the wall fell, or before the White Walkers started advancing south and killing all in their wake. By then it would be too late. How do you feel now? He asked. Honestly, she knew what he meant. All is well, I promise. Her gaze dropped from his own and turned to the fire. For a long moment, she watched the flames lapping in the hearth where they were reflected in her dark gray eyes. Actually, I'm a little afraid. Of what? He asked, leaning forward. I know I'm being stupid, she replied, but I fear what I will, or rather won't, find here. I remember what you said back at Dragonstone, when you told me what would happen. You said Eddard was dead, and some of his children and many of my friends. They're all gone. Everything I knew is gone. Not everything, he assured her. Winterfell still stands, and I'll take you back there. It's been damaged by fire and battles, but it's being rebuilt even as we speak. The Boltons are gone, their lands redistributed, and Daemon lives. Her gaze snapped back to his hope rising again. Ben's alive? Jon smiled, nodding. He lives and you might see him again once the wars are done. He'd heard what Rhaegar had said, that Lyanna mattered in the wars to come. But he had no intention of letting her out onto the battlefield to face another death. She can stay at Winterfell and sing her song of ice and fire from the battlements if it really mattered, but she would see no action on the front lines. Well, I'll be coming north with you, so I'll see him beyond the wall, she said. I would be the sweetest thing to see him again. Deciding he would inform her of his decision later, he changed the subject. You should rest. You can try and hide it, but I know you're still in pain. Rest now, and you'll be strong enough for my coronation this afternoon. It really isn't so bad. Certainly not bad enough to have me miss your big day, she replied. Anyway, Reborn is good. It aches, that is all. Was that really Lady Stark who brought me back? Yes, he answered. A follower of the Lord of Light taught her to do it, but it's cost her her life. I am sorry to hear it, said Lyon, but I think she must have loved you to sacrifice herself like that. Jon had told her about it in the past, of how he and Catelyn never got on. I wouldn't go that far. I don't know why she did it. Maybe guilt. I don't know, but it doesn't matter anymore. Her family is avenged and she can be at peace. Everyone deserves that, no matter what they've done in the past. He meant it. As well, everything he and Catelyn had gone through simply no longer mattered. He had stopped being a child a long time ago. Everything he had, he fought to get it, despite what she always said. He had proved himself before, and he felt able to do it again. You seem different now, she said, meeting his gaze again. When you were with me in the past, you were lost, and had lost everything. I remember it still, the way you jumped out in front of mine and Brandon's horses. You didn't even have clothes. Jon couldn't help but smile at the memory. Those who were still alive had forgotten him by the time he had been born and grown up, but both Lyanna and Rhaegar, taken while the memory was still fresh in their minds, had woken up in the future feeling as if it had all happened yesterday. But her main point was sharp in his mind now. No, I have nothing, he recalled. I didn't even have the Night's Watch anymore. I was cast out. Sansa was a wanted fugitive. I thought Bran and Arya were dead. I wanted to stay with you in the past and never come home again. That's what's different, Lyanna added. You have it all now. I think that's why you seem so afraid. Hunger fires you up when you have it all to gain. Once you have it all, fear of losing it again can cripple you. You ought not let that happen. He had to admit that she had a point. I won't. I swear it. I've never been craven. It's not craven, Jon. It's human nature, she corrected him. Anyway, we'll be behind you, pushing you forward should you need it. He tried to raise a smile at her encouragement, but only managed to twitch. A proper kick up the arse, if I know you right? That too, she grinned. But under that grin, he could see she was still dazed and bewildered by what had happened. Just like Rockire, she would need time to adapt and find her feet in a world much changed. Just like Rockire, she suspected she would overcome it all with style and aplomb. As needs must with the devils at the helm, the coronation was conducted with almost indecent haste. Less than 2 days after Jon was made king in the first place, the nobility of the realm gathered in the throne room of the Red Keep. Sansa had done what she could, using the preparations and ceremony to keep her mind off her mother. She kept telling herself that Lady Stark was at peace now, but it still hurt to have to lose her again. All the while, she stitched new banners for the throne room. The three-headed dragon now bedecked the whole castle, adorning the passage leading to the throne itself. The Lords Paramount would form an archway of crossed swords, under which the new king would process to take his place. After that, the High Septon would crown him and anoint his brow with sacred oil. Following that, Jon would be on his own, alone at the top. An hour before the event began, she met with Rhaegar and her aunt, who had only just left her place of convalescence to watch her son's coronation. Mercifully, only a few people knew who she was, and they were determined to keep Lyanna's identity a secret. We met when you first came around, said Sansa, but you won't remember. I'm Sansa, your niece. Lyanna smiled, almost as if in recognition, and greeted her with a kiss. Addard's daughter, I am sorry for your loss. It was a platitude all were offering her, but she smiled as best she could as she showed her aunt to her place in the throne room. Meanwhile, the place was filling up with lords and their retinues come to swear fealty to the new king. The sacred oil was still wet on Jon's forehead when they were reunited for the feast in Maegor's Holdfast. He held her tight, away from the crowds, and they kissed deeply. Huddled in an alcove like two lovers stealing a moment together, they let their hands pull at their robes, groping their way to the warm flesh beneath. "It's no farce. You are king," she retorted, "and of course I'll come." Inflamed by the promise, he kissed her again and nipped gently at her ear. "I need you." She'd had no idea that coronations were so amorous, but she suspected he only wanted it to be done so they could be alone. In the meantime, she merely enjoyed the moment, even though the coronation was over. They would not be permitted to dine together. All attention had to be on Jon and Jon alone. She would be seated at a lower table with Rhaegar and Lyanna. In the meantime, a fat lad dressed rough-spun was approaching them. Sansa just caught sight of him as her eyes peeped open, searching for the back of Jon's breeches. "Stop," she said. "Someone's coming." Disgruntled, Jon broke off. "Everyone keeps telling me this is my day and I can do what I want. Well, I want you." Sansa delivered a playful smack to his backside. "I think they meant within the context of a solemn coronation, Your Grace." "Damn them," he retorted. The newcomer approached quickly. To her horror, he threw back the curtain that shrouded them, causing Jon to swear audibly. Sansa swiftly straightened her own skirts and smiled as if nothing untoward was happening. All the while, the fat lad beamed. "What a shame I'm still too fat to bow," said the newcomer. Jon was looking furious as he whirled around to see who it was, but the anger melted faster than a summer snow. He looked so happy. Sansa thought he might cry. "Sam," he whispered before raising his voice. "Oh, God, Sam." Jon grabbed his old friend in a bear hug, and Sansa smiled with relief. She had heard all about Sam, and she knew he and Jon had not seen each other in almost 2 years. Protocol be damned, Jon was sharing his coronation feast table with them, whether the High Septon liked it or not. Jon left his own party early. Lyanna had returned to bed, exhausted from the day's events. Rhaegar had gone with her. Sansa looked thoroughly fed up with the whole thing, and he himself only wanted to sit up long into the night and catch up with Sam. Even seeing Gilly and little Sam again brought him joy. Although she was as shy as ever, she soon warmed to Sansa, and together the two girls played with little Sam while Jon and Big Sam repaired to the king's private solar. "I caught you at a bad time, didn't I?" Sam asked. His bashful tone suggested he knew what Jon and Sansa were trying to do, but hadn't figured it out until it was too late. "And I don't blame you. She's a real beauty." "I take it you know everything that happened?" he asked. "The stabbing and everything else, I mean." Sam's expression darkened. "I wanted to come right back as soon as I heard, but Old Town is so far from the wall that as soon as I heard, you'd have been back already. It was later, on the road, that we heard Rhaegar returned with you and that the dragons had arrived. That's when Marwen went to find you. He wrote to me and told me everything. And that was your mother, sitting by Rhaegar's side at the feast. Marwen told me who she was, but not that she was back too." Jon nodded, grinning from ear to ear. "That's her. But Catelyn Stark brought her back. Marwen wouldn't have known." "I wish I could have seen the look on Thorne's face when you came back," Sam sighed, sounding almost wistful. "So do I," he couldn't help but laugh. "But he'd already been burned for a traitor by the time I returned. Melisandre insisted on it, thinking his life would restore mine." "You know he ended up at the wall after he was captured fighting for your father on the Trident," said Sam. "Can you imagine how he'd look if he realized you were Rhaegar's true-born son?" The irony hadn't been lost on Jon, but it was all too late now, and that singular pleasure had been denied to him. Meanwhile, he turned to the crack in the door through which he could see Sansa rattling a toy at little Sam, the two women's indulgent laughter drifting into the solar. "They sound happy," Sam remarked. "Aye," he agreed. He remembered what the ghost of High Heart said. He remembered little Sam was their brother, the brother of the White Walkers, playing on his rug. But he was just a baby, like any other, toddling around on unsteady feet, chasing a silk ribbon. The women dangled in front of his face. Just a baby, oblivious to the danger of his kin. "That'll be you and Sansa soon," said Sam, happily. Jon felt the happiness draining out of him, replaced by a somber realization that this was to be just another fleeting moment. The war against the other was coming, and, if Hideheart was right, their biggest weapon against them was a few feet away, biting his growing teeth into a pudgy fist. Aye, he said again. The old god's willing, we'll have sons just like him. He couldn't say anything to Sam. Not tonight. The heavy chains had corroded, leaving a long streak of rust down the double doors that formed a once ornate entrance to the dragon pit. Jon lifted one of the coils that had been looped through the brackets, studying the padlock that held the chains secure. The key was probably long gone, which left them with the only option of flying in through the hole in the roof or brute force. As such, he stood aside and let the burly armorer, brandishing a huge pickaxe, get on with the task at hand. A few well-placed blows later, the chain's padlock split in two, and the chains slid to the ground, landing in a heap. He could smell the rust coming off them, a metallic dust that irritated his nasal passages. Daenerys thanked the man while Rhaegar handed over the money for his services. Meanwhile, Jon tried the doors. The pit had stood empty and abandoned for so long now that they refused to budge. He shoved against the weirwood doors with all his might, feeling the hinges buckle, but resist. Only after another monumental effort did they finally get access to the interior. It was a wide open space built of stone. A large shaft of dazzling light shone down through the hole in the roof, but all else was in shadow and darkness. He blinked rapidly, trying to get accustomed to the contrasting light. After a while, he could make out the stone alcoves in which the old Targaryen dragons were housed. Staked to the stone floor were chains now long rusted. Nothing more than stains seeping into the cracks in the flagstones. At regular intervals, braziers stood dark and misshapen by the walls. Rats had gotten in and made their nests in some of them. You can see where the last dragons tried to escape. Rosaire moved toward the shaft of light, shielding his eyes as he looked up to the hole in the roof. Up through there. I don't want to keep them here, said Daenerys. She hugged her arms around her middle, shivering against the cold air of decay that hung over the place. It's not right that our dragons be housed where the last were slain. I don't like it. Unless you have any better ideas, I think we have no choice, Jon replied. We can't have them flying free over the city. Ghost had shied at the doors, refusing to enter. He cowered there, still. Jon tried to beckon him inside, but still he backed up. His fur was bristling. It won't be for long, Roger assured her. We're going north soon. We're going south first, Jon pointed out. We already have the Dornish on our side, but from the border and north, I want to march the length of this realm and rally every man to our cause. It'll take months, said Roger, and you can just call your banners. Now that you are king, they're all yours. But Jon had already given it his careful consideration. I know that, but my uncle Eddard would never have asked strangers to fight for him, and these people don't know their new king. I would speak to them myself, show myself to them, and show the king I mean to be. They will know me, and I'll look them in the eye when I tell them why they must fight a war, thousands of miles from their home. There was a moment of silence in which the other two watched him, but he didn't look back. He was still walking a wide circle around the dragon pit. There were more stalls than there ever had been dragons, he noted. Scores of them, but once, he guessed, the Targaryens would have had many dragons grown and mere hatchlings alike. Now that his eyes had adjusted, he could see the walls were blackened from ancient dragon fire. Some was even melted, like the stones of Harrenhal. It's a noble thought, said Rhaegar. But is there time? The longer we tarry south, well, you said it yourself, and we still have the funeral to prepare for. Are you a dragon rider or not? Daenerys retorted. Jon won't be alone, we'll be with him. The three of us together will raise the biggest army the world has ever seen. We can fly from place to place, recruiting as we go. Through the gloom, Jon could see his father's smile of approval. I suppose we could send the soldiers north in fleets of ships. Ridwines, Greyjoys, and what's left of Cersei's fleet will be a good start. The Manderleys have a large fleet too, Jon reminded him. Lord Manderley has been building new ships for years. He can set sail up the east. The Martells and Redwynes can take those from the west. The Greyjoys too, if they can get past their uncle's lines. For now, trade can hold until the army is north, so requisition trade galleys. Despite the danger, Jon felt a flicker of excitement unfurling deep inside him. If they could do this, if they could rally the whole realm as never before, they would face the oncoming threat as a unified whole. And Cersei is queen in all but name, Jon added. These are her people too. She will be at my side. You'd be better off if she was also your queen in name, said Daenerys. Marry her and make it official. Better yet, get her with child, said Rhaegar. If we all die in the wars to come, the realm will be in chaos if Lady Saints is not with child. Weeder, better, then we'll be on our way. Although he saw the sense in it, Jon dug his heels in. I promised her the wedding of her dreams. Save it for her coronation, Jon. We don't have time for girlhood dreams, Rocker cut in. We need legitimate heirs. Jon wrapped his coat tighter around his middle as the temperature dropped again. The light spilling through the hole in the ceiling paled to silver. All the while, he wrestled with the notion of a wedding conducted with almost indecent haste, despite what he had promised his bride. Once you hold your newborn heir in your arms, you'll know what it is to have something to fight for, Rogier put in. You need to act. I said, I'll talk to her, Jon interjected angrily. Now cease haranguing me. He'd come to inspect the dragon pit, and that was what he continued to do. Leaving Rhaegar gaping at him aghast, he studied the stalls and the damage done during the dragon massacre. The hole in the roof was where the last of them had tried in vain to escape, and he could not remember the beast's name. But Daenerys was right. The place had a foreboding feel to it. His aunt followed him at a distance, keeping her thoughts mostly to herself. Something else is troubling you, she said at length. Something more than weddings and wars, I think. Again, he was close to the mark. It does help. But the ghost of Highheart told me something. Not about Sam, but little Sam. The baby Gilly has. The ghost of Highheart, Dany repeated, questioningly. She was there the night Summerhall burned down, Rogier explained. Jenny of Old Stones brought her. She prophesied that the prince that was promised would be born to the line of Aerys and Rhaegarys. She told me how I would become king. And she told me that the key to defeating the others was little Sam. Both Rhaegar and Daenerys looked skeptical now. They circled around him, keeping a distance. He's just Sam's baby, said Dany. He lay with the Wilding girl. That's all. Rogier shrugged. That's what I thought, too. A crime against the Watch, but perfectly understandable. Jon drew a reluctant breath. Sam's not the father. Old Craster, Gilly's father, raped her and got her with child. He did that to all his daughter wives. Whenever one of them birthed a boy, it was left as an offering to the others. They're Craster's sons. Little Sam is their brother. Daenerys looked disgusted. Those poor women. Where is this Craster now? Dead, Jon answered. Yes, it's awful, but we're getting sidelined, said Rogar. That child has the blood of the others. Did Highheart explicitly say you needed to sacrifice this child? Jon thought about it, recalling the last time he saw the ghost. No, she said. I knew it needed to be done, though, which was demonstrably wrong. Those people never give straight answers. Blood, Jon. You need the blood, Rogier stated, authoritatively. You don't have to kill a child just to get its blood. Jon snapped to attention, looking his father in the eye and hoping more than anything he was right. Even if he was wrong, he was not about to sacrifice a baby anyway. They would face the oncoming threat with an army of men grown. If I could just get a scratch, he began, trailing off as he considered the possibilities. Little Sam's on his feet now. Babies that age are forever getting bumps and scrapes. For a moment, Daenerys was deep in thought. Blood magic, she said. I've seen the Red Priestesses do it. There's one at the wall, now. Melisandre, he suggested. They use leeches, Dany continued. Starve a leech until it's tiny, then let it at the child and keep it once it's done. Melisandre will know what to do. Maybe that's what the key is. They would have their magic blood and no harm done to the child at all, besides a blood-sucking parasite clamped to his leg. And it didn't have to be done now. They could collect the leeches before the waterways froze and bring them north to Melisandre herself. Jon smiled, feeling a weight shift from his shoulders at last. He turned to his father and aunt, where they had taken shelter in an old dragon stall. Sam, Gilly and the baby are coming north with us anyway, he said. I'll send a raven to Castle Black, summoning Melisandre to Winterfell. She can meet us there. As he spoke, something caught Daenerys' eye. She was looking over Jon's shoulder, a frown tightening her brow. What's that? It was probably just a rat, he thought. They'd been scratching around ever since they busted through the doors. But when he turned to see what she was looking at, he saw the snowflakes swirling through the beams of light that spilled down through the hole in the roof. They sparkled briefly, glinting brightly before they melted in midair. Undeterred, Dany rushed over to stand beneath the caved-in ceiling, trying to catch a snowflake in the palm of her hand. You've delivered on your first royal promise, Jon, Racker laughed. Winter has come to King's Landing. Without another word, they strode from the dragon pit and out into the open to see properly. Even in the few moments they had looked away, the snow had thickened and fell in squalls, the snow they had left behind in the Riverlands, finally catching up with them as winter finally engulfed the realm. Although he knew what the snows brought, Jon allowed himself just a moment to savor the sight. Daenerys, meanwhile, walked in the squalls with her hands outstretched. But then, Jon supposed, there wasn't much snow in the Red Wastes, or Meereen, or whatever far-flung regions of the Far East she had tried to call home. She looked like a child hankering to build a snowman. "This is it," he said, turning to his father. "Winter has come, and we must ride out to meet it." That night, Raka stoked the fires in his apartments himself, rather than waste time waiting for the servants. The snowfalls intensified all through the day, soon carpeting the city and smothering the rooftops in a pretty marzipan layer of white. Beautiful to look at, he knew, but soon they'd be bringing out the dead of those too poor for firewood or proper housing. The weak and sick would go first, along with the elderly and the babes in arms. They always did. But it wouldn't take long for the young and the healthy to start wasting away as winter's privations began to bite deep. And if this was the long night, he shuddered to think how bad things could get. After reviving the fire in his apartments, he paused to watch from the window. Darkness had fallen now, but the light of a full moon shone down, turning the swirling snows silver. It showed no sign of letting up. "You look so worried." Lyanna's reflection appeared in the window he was looking out of, pallid and ghostly. As she wrapped her arms around his middle, she added, "Come and eat, my lord. There's no use fretting on it yet." He turned to face her properly, taking a moment to brush some loose strands of hair back from her face. In the few days since she had returned to them, she had grown strong quickly. There was a healthy glow in her face, and her belly healed clean and fast, too. The fires had cleansed her, imbued her with a life force that made her skin almost warm to the touch. She seemed to him to be more beautiful than ever. "Go easy, my love," he said, mock pleading. "Us saffron pansies are unused to such harsh climes." She rolled her eyes. "I would have thought a few months in Winterfell would have acquainted you with snow by now." It wasn't really the winter, though. It was what winter would bring that worried Roritier, and they had yet to fly farther south to raise their army. All corners of the realm would be descending on the north in a few months. For now, however, he was content to let his wife lead him over to the dining room where they would savor their last few hours alone. "Are you ready for it?" she asked once they were seated. "As much as I'll ever be," he answered. "It really doesn't help that the last major battle I fought, I also lost. Cerebristan will be with you. Put him in charge, and Jon—" "Barristan was at the Trident with me, too," Rhaegar reminded her. "But you're right, it is different this time. For once, the entire realm will be fighting on the same side." Unable to eat, he pushed some venison around the plate, and then gave up with a heavy sigh. Lyanna cast him a disapproving glance from the opposite end of the table. A look she might have given a child in a temper to his own amusement. A shame she had missed out on raising their own child. He thought she might have been quite good at it. A thought that only reminded him of what they would be doing tomorrow before flying out to raise their nationwide army. "It's Lady Stark's funeral tomorrow," he said. "How do you feel about her?" "Grateful," she replied with a shrug. "She gave her second life to resurrect us. Beyond that, it's not every highborn who would suffer the indignity of raising another woman's bastard, which is what she thought our son was." Rogier scowled. "So, we should be grateful she didn't leave our prince out in the woods for the wolves to finish off." Lyanna seemed quite amused. "If she had thrown him to the wolves, he'd have come back leading the pack, my love. He has a knack for survival." He couldn't disagree with that. Leaning back in his chair, finishing off the last of his wine, he regarded her again. This would be their last night before the Great War began in earnest, and it struck him again how beautiful she was. Candles stood on the table between them, their light reflected in her dark gray eyes. The shape of them, wide and bright, reached into the pit of his being. The shape of her slender hips as she rose from her seat, visible beneath the bodice laced tight up her front and causing her breasts to swell ever so slightly over the top. When she leaned forwards. Although he still wasn't hungry, he was working up an appetite all the same. "The masters did assure us you would have no more children, didn't they?" he asked, eyes still venturing down the space between her breasts. "Yes, I hope you're not disappointed," she replied. "I would give you more if I could." "No, it could cause problems for Jon," he assured her. Noticing how downcast she looked, Rozier was quick to accentuate the positive. "It also means we get to spend our final. Well, you know, He had the decency to blush, while Lyanna smiled wolfishly. Well then, let's not waste another minute. Sleepless, despite his exhaustion, Jon lay back with his face turned towards the window, watching the snow drift past the window. It was a night like countless nights he had spent at Winterfell, as a child. As an adult, he'd slept outdoors and worse during his time beyond the wall. Only now Sansa lay in his arms, dozing lightly and waking often. "Are you all right?" she asked, voice low and heavy. "You need to try and sleep." "I'm fine," he tried to assure her, but the words felt hollow even in his own ears. The bed sheets rumpled as she moved, craning her neck to kiss his cheek. After she did so, she cupped his face with her hand, gently turning his face toward her. "I love you." Just for a moment, all his worries and all his fears no longer mattered. He raised a smile easily as he propped himself up to return her kiss. He never aspired to be a poet, something he once told Sam Tarley under very different circumstances. He had other ways of making his feelings plain, and, come dawn, they lay entangled in rumpled sheets, sweating and breathless as a pale sun gave darkness chase. But the day was waiting to bring them both back to earth with a bump. Jon formed up his entire household guard, slowly moving them all out of the Red Keep for the long journey north. Daenerys arrived from Dragonstone, dragons in tow, while Sansa prepared for her mother's funeral. With time wasted getting the first soldiers dispatched, they left later than they had anticipated, and their progress south was hampered by the heavy snowfalls. After 2 days' ride, they reached the part of the Blackwater they wanted. For Jon, it was enough of a relief to know it hadn't frozen solid and that their funeral boat had traveled ahead of them anyway. It had arrived before they did, and, following a chaotic start, the funeral offered them a chance to pause and reflect on what was happening around them. For that, as well as all else she had done, Jon found himself strangely grateful to Lady Stark. The morning of the now delayed funeral dawned cold and snowy. Wrapped in new furs, Lyanna and Sansa filled the base of the boat with flowers before laying Catelyn's body on top of them. Rhaegar had donated a cloth of gold funeral shroud to wrap the body in, and Sansa had found an old necklace that her mother had gifted her, one named day, long ago. Edmure Tully had provided them with a family sigil, from which Sansa was able to stitch a sail during the journey from King's Landing. Then, finally, it was done. The boat bobbed on the river, the hardening winds filling the sail and making the leaping trout shine silver. Standing downwind, on the riverbank, Jon could catch the scent of the flowers the girls had picked. Lilies and carnations, roses and lavender, what was left of the summer flowers growing in the Queen's gardens back at the Red Keep. Overhead, the dragons circled in the freezing skies. Before the boat was cast off, Jon walked the length of the wharf to look upon his old nemesis one more time. Wrapped in Rhaegar's shroud, there was nothing to be seen of her now. Her body had begun to decay, too, but the long and slender shape of the remains was Catelyn. Like enough for him, she is at peace now, he said, turning to Sansa. Her family is avenged, her daughters are home, and you will be queen. She is at peace. Her tears froze on her cheeks. I know she is. Jon tried to smile, if only to encourage her. But Sansa had lost her mother twice. Now, and the second time was no easier than the first. Before too long, however, they were joined by Rhaegar and Lyanna, with Edmure and Sir Davos bringing up the rear. With great difficulty, a brazier had been lit on the wharf, and Jon was able to use it to light the arrows that would set Catelyn's floating pyre alight. Meanwhile, it was Sir Davos who untethered the boat and cast it downriver. Alongside Edmure and Rhaegar, Jon picked up a bow and knocked a flaming arrow, drawn back fully, so that the bowstring creaked. They paused while the boat picked up speed. Snowmelt had swollen the Blackwater, helping speed Lady Stark on her way. In that small moment, he remembered the Catelyn of his childhood, but he felt no animosity now. Only a strange sadness at what could have been had Lord Stark decided to tell her the truth. The arrows loosed, all three at once. Jon's hit the mast, setting the wooden pole alight. Rosier's hit the sail, the silk burning easily, while Edmure's thudded to a halt on the gunwale, setting the gold shroud alight. In silence, they watched the flames slowly claim the boat. A thin trail of smoke quickly thickened, marking the pyre's progress downstream. No one moved until the boat was out of sight, engulfed in flames, and it was done. Sansa sniffed daintily, accepting a hug and a kiss from Lyanna, who whispered words of condolence in her ear. Then she looked at Jon, the ghost of a smile on her face. "It is time," said Sansa. Jon nodded as Rhaego landed on the riverbank, sending up a plume of steam as his hot scales hit the snow. From across the river, those bronze eyes met his own, as if issuing a challenge. "Let's go," he said. He kissed her lips before taking her by the hand, setting off at a run toward their waiting dragon.